How y'all doing? I'm the Watchman, and as you can see behind me, I'm on a camping trip this weekend, and of course, I'm supposed to be getting out, getting some fresh air, spending time with our Father. And as I was sitting here, I realized, the Lord said, "Well, I'm about to start a series, and it was going to be a book I was going to start, but the urgency of the time calls for other measures to get things out. Uh, if time permits, later on, and a book does be written, so be it. But the name of the series was the title of the book, and it was called "The Day the Devil Disappeared." The day the devil disappeared. And you might say, "Joshua, Watchman, what do you mean, the day the devil disappeared?" Well, what I'm really saying is, they say, and this is just an old saying, the biggest trick that the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he didn't exist. Well, with that in mind, the thing is, how did he convince the world that he didn't exist, or how did the devil disappear? Well, it hit me one night, months ago. The day the devil disappeared was the day the devil became a Christian. For remember, he used to persecute and kill and slaughter Christians, and the more Christians he killed, the more that was sprouted in their places. For it even said, an old reformer wrote that every Christian who was killed, whose blood was spilled, two rose up in his spot. So the devil was like, "I'm going to have to switch my tactics." And what's that old saying? If you can't beat them, join them. And that's what he did. The day the devil disappeared. And this is, the subject is so deep that this is part 1 in the series. And it's called Babylon Rising. For to understand how the devil actually disappeared inside of Christianity, you have to understand the certain pieces that he used and the certain players in this warfare, and in the most famous disappearing act ever in our history. So in the study of the day the devil disappeared, this is part 1, called Babylon Rising. And I realize a lot of people honestly don't know. And it's because, of course, the devil doesn't want to talk of who and what Babylon really is and what she really represents. So I urge you, get a pencil, a piece of paper, because what I like to always say, don't take my word for it. Study for yourselves. The truth loves investigation. And use the internet, use the devil's tool for heavenly work. Google it. You can Google history. Do not try to you can't separate history from the word. You can't separate history from the word. But anyway, it is all right there for the pudding. And like I stress it, the truth loves investigation. Let's reason together. Let's get right down to it. The day the devil disappeared, and this is part 1, Babylon Rising. Now, in understanding Babylon and what was her place and why the devil used Babylon and what she really is, we first must understand that the devil's aim in this warfare, his first attack, is after God's sanctuary. after the heavenly sanctuary. Now, of course, I'm not just going to tell you, I'm going to show you. And like I stress, get all your answers from the Bible. If it doesn't come from the Bible, it might not be worth it. It might not be the truth. Especially, why talk about the Bible if you're not going to use the Bible? Okay? Now I say, the devil's aim in this warfare has been to destroy God's heavenly sanctuary. And why would his aim be to destroy the sanctuary? Go to Psalms. Turn with me to Psalm 77. Let's go to Psalm 77. I wasn't going to read this verse, but let's start off with this verse right here. Psalm 77, I'm going to read verse 13. Verse 13. David says, Thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary. Who is so great a God as our God? So, God's way, his way, is in the sanctuary. So, if God's way is in the sanctuary and the devil hates God and is at war with God, then who is the devil actually attacking? Who is the devil actually attacking, and where is he gonna attack first? He's gonna attack God's sanctuary. God's sanctuary. Well, turn with me. Let's go to Ezekiel. Let's go to Ezekiel. And I'm up here camping. Before we get deep started, I'm up here camping with my church members. We're waiting on everybody else to get here. Brother D is napping in the tent. Pop in them tent is right over here. Him and his wife Nam Soup. And I'm out here enjoying this fresh air, wanting to get some studying done. Alright, Ezekiel 28. Ezekiel 28, and we're going to start at verse 14. Ezekiel 28, and we're going to start at verse 14. It reads, Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth, and I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. I'm going to stop right there. Now this is talking about Lucifer, Satan, the devil, when he was in heaven. Now God says he was the cherub, the anointed cherub that covered. For those who don't know, the Ark of the Covenant in the sanctuary, when you go into the last compartment, the most holy place, there are two angels that sit on top of the ark, on top of the mercy seat. And in the mercy seat is God's throne, and under the mercy seat is the ark, which contains God's law. Now the two angels on top of the mercy seat are called the cherubs that cover it, and that's what Satan was. In heaven, Satan was one of these angels that sat on top of the mercy seat. Can you guess who was the other angel? If you guess Jesus, you guess right. Except when Jesus is in this role on top of the mercy seat, when Jesus is in this role, he is called Michael, the archangel. Now, a lot of people, some people like to argue and get on that point that Jesus and Michael two separate beings. Well, like I said, if it don't come from here, it might not be true. Most likely, it probably isn't. Let's let the Bible answer the Bible every time, because I'm gonna pause right there, and just to show, let's go to Daniel 12. Now this is to show. Now remember, you had Satan was the anointed cherub that covered it. So he's one angel on one side of the mercy seat. Let's see who the other angel is. Now remember, these two angels sat on top of the mercy seat, which is on top of the ark. And this piece of furniture in the sanctuary is called the Ark of the Covenant. Now what was Michael called? Michael, the archangel, the angel of the ark. For out of the two cherubs, Michael was the supreme. Michael was the supreme. Let's go to Daniel. Daniel chapter 12, and we're going to read verse 1. Daniel 12 verse 1 says, And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that should be found written in the book. Now this says with Michael, it says, and at that time Michael shall stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. There is only one great prince spoken of in the Bible, and we know his name is Jesus. But if that's not enough for some, go to 2 Thessalonians. 2 Thessalonians. Let's see. 2 Thessalonians. I'm going to go to chapter 4. 2 Thessalonians, chapter 4, verse 16. I'm sorry, y'all. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 verse 16. Okay. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 verse 16 says, for the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Now, are you telling me if they two different people, you telling me Jesus is going to take somebody else's voice? You know, my friends call me a lot of things. I have a couple different names. Some call me JT, Joshua. You know, when I used to rap, I had different rap names for different moods I was in, or different things. And that's what Jesus is. When Jesus is in his job, oh yes, everyone had a job in heaven. Even Jesus, remember, Jesus said, I serve my Father. These two angels that was on top of the Ark of the Covenant protected the law and the throne. Jesus' role when he was on his job, he was called Michael, the archangel. Like we just seen Daniel 12 verse 1, Michael is referred to as the great prince. Like we see right here in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 verse no, we just read it. Chapter 4 verse 16 says, for the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel. You know, so right there we see that when Jesus comes, he's going to have the voice of the archangel. Now, of course, he's not going to take somebody else's voice. He's Christ. He's the king. He doesn't have to use nobody else's voice. He uses his own voice. You know, he uses his own voice. But anyway, now all of that was just to show about, let's go back to Ezekiel 28. Ezekiel 28. Now all of that was just to show that right here in Ezekiel 28 verse 14, that where it says, where God calls the devil, thou art the anointed cherub that covered, that the devil is the one on the ark with Christ. Now, and you have to know your enemy to defeat your enemy. And this is why we're doing this history level on this, to understand how the devil disappeared, pulled off this disappearing act. You must know him. And the most untold story in the Bible is the story of our enemy. And if any story should be told, it should be of the one who we're fighting against. You know, I used to, before I really gave my heart to the Lord, I used to do a lot of boxing. And I'm going to tell you, if I would have stepped in this ring and didn't know who I was boxing, I would have got whooped. You know, if I don't know he's a unorthodox, if he can use, or like me, ambidextrous, use both hands, you know, fight both styles, or he might just be a southpaw, you know. If I don't know that, if I don't know how he fights, I'm going to lose every time. I'm going to lose every time. And that's why fighters would spend months studying their opponents. How come we as Christians don't? But anyway, let's get back to learning who our enemy is, who we're fighting. Anyway, Ezekiel 28 verse 14. Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth, and I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day thou wast created, till iniquity was found in thee. Iniquity in Greek means lawlessness. Another word for iniquity is lawlessness. Okay, verse 16. By the multitude of thy merchandise they have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned. Therefore I will cast thee as profane out of the mountain of God, and will destroy thee, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Thine heart was lifted up because of thy beauty. Thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by reason of thy brightness. I will cast thee to the ground. I will lay thee before kings, that they may behold thee. Verse 18. Now remember, I read all of this to show that the devil's aim is to attack God's sanctuary. Verse 18. Thou hast defiled thy sanctuaries by the multitude of thy iniquities. Let's throw lawlessness in there. Thou hast defiled thy sanctuaries by the multitude of thine lawlessness, by the lawlessness of thy traffic. Thy traffic. Another word for traffic is pushing. What is the devil pushing? What is he pushing? What is the devil pushing? Let's see. Go to John 8. John 8, and we're going to read verse 44. What is it says, remember Ezekiel 28, what we just read, Ezekiel 28 verse 18 said, by the iniquity of thy traffic. What was the devil trafficking? What was he pushing? John 8 verse 44. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. He is pushing lies, for the devil is pushing lies. That is his traffic. So we know that the devil is pushing lies, and with these lies he has defiled God's sanctuary. That is his aim, is to defile God's sanctuary. Go to Isaiah 14, and we're going to read verse 12. We're learning about our enemy. How else can you even recognize or learn about him disappearing if you don't know who he is and why he's at war with Christ anyway? Why he's at war with Christ anyway? Isaiah 14, and we're going to read verse 12. It says, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thy heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. Now he just says, I will sit upon the mount of the congregation. There was a congregation in heaven. So if there's a congregation in heaven, where do congregations meet? In the sanctuary. And he says he wants to sit in the congregation, in the mount of the congregation. His aim has always been to attack God's sanctuary so he could set up his own place of worship. For we know that he wanted God's worship. For he wanted God's worship. He wanted God's throne. Verse 14, Isaiah 14 verse 14. I will ascend above the heights of the cloud. I will be like the Most High. How is the Most High? The Most High is ruler over all. Satan wants to be ruler over all and be worshipped. And be worshipped. Now, you see right there, he says, I will sit upon the mount of the congregation. Now, to take hold of God's sanctuary, or to overthrow God's place of worship, you must attack it first. You must attack it first. And when Satan did this physically, he was kicked out of heaven. I wasn't gonna show it, but let's go to it. Revelation 12, and read verse 7. Now remember the two cherubs, right? Their jobs was to protect God's throne and protect his law. You know? Now remember, the devil was one, and he rebelled. Remember I said Christ was the other one? Who name is Michael, the archangel, the angel of the ark. Revelation 12 verse 7 says, and there was war in heaven, Michael and his angels. See how it says Michael and his angels? These are Michael's angels. Who has ownership in heaven? Christ. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So Michael, which is Jesus, Jesus kicked the devil out of heaven. The devil physically tried to take God's heavenly sanctuary, because inside the heavenly sanctuary, y'all, is God's throne. Is God's throne. Now, how do we know this? Because in the Old Testament sanctuary, it was modeled exactly after the heavenly. Let's look at that verse. Turn with me to Exodus. Go to Exodus 25. God states it. I want to state it again. The earthly Old Testament sanctuary, tabernacle, with the courtyard, the altar of burnt offering, the laver of brass, the table of showbread, the holy place and the most holy. This was made exactly after, patterned after the heavenly sanctuary. The heavenly sanctuary. Exodus 25, and we're going to start at verse 8. Exodus 25, and we're going to start at verse 8. I see Brother D is climbing up out of the tent. Brother Dakaris. Can you say hello to the peoples when he's busy waking up? But I'll get him to say hello. Anyway, the earthly Old Testament tabernacle is modeled exactly after the new. Me and Brother Descartes go back to like Etch a Sketches and Light Brights, y'all. All right.
Man, this is about to come down.
Yeah, it is about to rain.
Get some of this stuff out the rain before it comes down, so it don't transport it while it's wet.
Exodus 25, and we're going to read verse 8. Exodus 25, and we're going to start at verse 8. It says, and let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show thee, after the pattern of the tabernacle, and the pattern of all the instruments thereof, even so shall you make it. It says after the pattern of the tabernacle. What tabernacle? If God is telling Moses to build me a sanctuary on earth for the very first time, his very first sanctuary, and he says build it after the pattern of the tabernacle. Let's go up a couple of lines before that. He says, according to all that I show thee, after the pattern of the tabernacle. What tabernacle or temple was God talking about? The heavenly temple and tabernacle. He says, after the pattern that I show you, after this tabernacle, build the earthly sanctuary. So we know, and in the earthly sanctuary, God's throne is located where? It is the mercy seat located in the most holy place, in the heart of the sanctuary. So if the devil wants God's throne, where does he have to go? He has to attack the sanctuary. He has to attack the sanctuary. Why are we stating this again? Because the devil pulled off the greatest disappearing act in the history of mankind. And let's expose him. Anyway, okay. Now remember, this first lesson is called Babylon Rising. So where does Babylon fit in all this? Good question, Joshua. Go back to Isaiah. Let's go back to Isaiah 14, where we were just reading, where it was talking about the devil. Where it was talking about the devil. In fact, I'm going to go up. We're going to start at Isaiah 14. Now, Isaiah 14, 12 through 22 is all about Lucifer. All about Lucifer. And we're going to start where I left off. We'll start where I left off. Verse 15. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. They that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee, and consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms, that made the world as a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof, that opened not the house of the prisoners. All the kings of the nations, even all of them, lie in glory, every one in his own house. But thou art cast out of thy grave like an abominable branch, and as the raiment of those that are slain, thrust through with a sword, that go down to the stones of the pit, and as a carcass trodden under foot. Thou shalt not be joined with them in burial, because thou hast destroyed the land and slain the people. The seed of evildoers shall never be renowned. Prepare slaughter for his children, for the iniquity, the lawlessness of their fathers, that they do not rise, nor possess the land, nor fill the face of the world with cities. For I will rise up against them, saith the Lord of hosts, and cut off from Babylon the name and remnant and son and nephew, saith the Lord. Now, all of this is talking about Lucifer. And then God mentions Babylon. Read verse 22 again. For I will rise up against them, saith the Lord of hosts, and cut off from Babylon the name and remnant and son and nephew, saith the Lord. And then it says remnant. So Babylon has offspring. Has offspring. How could Babylon have offspring? And what is Babylon? You see, Babylon is mentioned. The only city mentioned when God is talking about Lucifer right there. It's the only city mentioned right there. Let's find out first what is Babylon. Go to Revelation 17. Let's go to Revelation 17. Revelation 17, and I'm going to start at verse 1. Revelation 17, we're going to start at verse 1. It says, And there came one of the 7 angels, which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come here, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast. Scarlet is the color of sin, and beast means kingdom. Anytime beast is mentioned in prophecy, it means kingdom. But anyway, it says, And I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet. Remember, in verse 3 it just said full of names. Remember that what we just said. This woman is full of names. Anyway, in verse 4, And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great. Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. Now, God calls her in verse 5, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Now, it says the mother of harlots. A harlot, someone who fornicates with another, who cheats, who commits adultery on her husband, or sleeps or has many lovers. There's several different definitions for a harlot. One can be one who has many lovers, and a woman who has cheated on her love. Now, why would Babylon be called the mother of harlots? And to answer this would show what the heart of Babylon and what she really is, and what God means when he refers to her. And then calls her the mother of harlots. The mother of harlots. So she is the beginning of something. For the mother is the start. A child can't come before the mom. You know, the mother comes before the child. So let's find out really what Babylon really is. You know, and why God calls her the mother of harlots. Go to Genesis. Let's go to the beginning of the Bible. I'm going to show how deep this rabbit hole really is. Go to Genesis. And we're going to start at Genesis 10. Go to Genesis 10. Genesis 10, and we're going to read verse 8. Genesis 10, we're going to start at verse 8. It says, "And Cush begot Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel." Now, Babel is the root word of, guess what word? Babylon. Babel is the root word of Babylon. See, Nimrod was the devil's first superstar, or in our today's terms, Nimrod was the devil's first celebrity. He was the first man spoken of in the Bible to be followed, to be popular, to be worshipped. Nimrod, and that's why it says right here, verse 9, Genesis 10 verse 9, he was a mighty hunter even before the Lord in the beginning of his kingdom. Beginning of his, see, he had a kingdom. He was followed. He was worshipped. And once you do your homework, you'll find out that the pagans back then, the people back then, used to worship Nimrod as the sun god, the actual sun, the S-U-N. Isn't it funny how the devil copycats? Remember, we read in Isaiah 14 where the devil said, "I will be like the Most High." Isn't it funny how the devil copycats God? The devil knew that God would send his S-O-N to save mankind. So the devil had people start to worship the S-U-N. Let me say that again. The devil knew that God would send his S-O-N to save mankind. So the devil started to worship, devil had people start to worship the S-U-N. The S-U-N. And Nimrod was hailed as the sun god. Not only was he the first superstar, the first celebrity, the first man to be followed other than God, sun worship became. Now remember, Nimrod started Babel, which is the root of Babylon. It's where Babylon comes from. Babel. So sun worship was the first religion opposite of God's truth, making Babylon, which is really referred to as Babel, making Babel the mother of all harlots. Sun worship is the mother of all harlots because there was no other worship of any kind other than God. Men were evil because, with Noah, God had to destroy. They were evil and they were sinning. Not saying that there was no sin on the earth. They were cutting up. But as far as the first person being worshipped, the first man spoken of in the Bible to have a kingdom other than God was Nimrod. And they worshipped him as the S-U-N, sun worship. This is the introduction of sun worship. So sun worship was the first alternate religion other than God's truth, making sun worship the mother of all harlots. And that's why in Revelation 18, when God refers to Babylon, he calls her Babylon the Great, the mother of all harlots. The mother of all harlots, because you go back to the very beginning, to Nimrod. Sun worship was the first religion. I have to stress it. I really want you to get it. Sun worship was the first religion, alternate of God's truth. Alternate of God's truth. And it is raining, but we're under a tree. And I'm gonna speed this up real quick, but I'm gonna sit this in. Now, what happened what happened on the day, what happened with the Tower of Babel, we know. Now stay with me in Genesis. In Genesis 10. Now it said in go to, matter of fact, go to Genesis 11. And it said, and they said, go to, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the earth. Now, do you think they wanted to go to heaven just to meet God? Remember, Nimrod was a hunter. They were trying, remember, the devil, his aim and goal before being kicked out of heaven was to go to heaven. And I mean, his aim and goal was to attack the heavenly sanctuary and take over God's sanctuary. Well, here the devil was using people. He was using his first superstar, his first celebrity, the first person that he had being worshipped, who the first person spoken of in the Bible to have a kingdom other than God. He tried to use him to build a tower to heaven to attack God and attack God's holy sanctuary. And if you see in Genesis 11 verse 4, it says, they say, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name. Didn't we hear that before? Go back to Revelation 17, where it talks about Babylon. And what does it say when it describes her? What does it say when it describes her? In verse 4? No, verse 3. And she says, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet colored beast full of names of blasphemy. This woman, Babylon, is full of names. And what do we read about Babel? The beginning of Babylon, because Babylon came from Babel. Both words mean the same. Both words mean confusion. Babel is the root of Babylon. What does it say, verse 4? And they said, let us make us a name, and then lest we be scattered abroad. Why would she be full of many names? I want to show this analogy right here for y'all. I'm going to write a quick analogy. You have all the people. Matter of fact, let me read. Let's read verse 5 real quick while it's raining. We're going to get this out the way anyway. The devil trying to stop it. I'll tell you he's upset, but we're going to get this out the way. Verse 5, Genesis 11 verse 5 says, and the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down and there and confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth. And from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. Now remember, I told you, keep your finger on Revelation 17, because we're going to be flipping back and forth, referring to different verses that mean the same. Now if you see what we just read in describing Babylon in Revelation 17 verse 2, it says, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication. Now remember, it's sun worship. Keep that in mind. Now go to Revelation 18 on to verse 3. It says, for all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath. All nations, all the kings of the earth, why would they so easily commit fornication with Babylon, with sun worship? Now remember, it said in Revelation 17 verse 3, it says she's full of names. Why would she be full of names? Let's show why. You have all these people. Okay, I'm gonna make a whole bunch of people. All the squiggly lines of people. This is the whole people. Everybody's one, and they're building the tower. Let's draw a fake tower. Okay, this is the tower that they're building. This is all the people. Now God says all the people are one. They're one language. Now remember, they believe in Nimrod, but there's two more players in this puzzle. Not only do they believe in Nimrod, think about it. If they worship Nimrod as the sun god, his wife was worshipped as the goddess of the moon, and her name was Semiramis. And So you have Nimrod and Semiramis. Semiramis. Now look, when Nimrod died, Semiramis got pregnant. She got pregnant. Now, even in death, she wasn't supposed to be sleeping with nobody else. So she knew the people would kill her because they held Nimrod as a god. So she told the people that Nimrod came to her at night, came to her in spirit, got her pregnant, and she had Tammuz. What did that sound like? Now remember, the devil copycats God. He copycats God and everything. Don't that sound like Mary? She said, Semiramis said that Nimrod, who is dead, he's dead right now, and she's running the kingdom. She said that Nimrod came to her in spirit, got her pregnant, and she had Tammuz. Okay, now this is the three players. You got Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. You got the Tower of Babel, and you got the people. Now they hold these three as deity. They hold these three as deity. Now I'm going to show how these three is the devil's copycat version of God, Jesus, Mary. You know, because we know the Holy Spirit came to Mary, and Mary bore Jesus, and Jesus is the Son of God. Now the people started worshiping Tammuz as the new sun god because they believed that he is the son of Nimrod. Okay, but anyway, God says, let me come down there and let me confound their language. So, and make the people separate, because right now the people are one. So each of these lines say that's Spanish speaking people, English speaking, German, you name it, all these languages. So God confounds their language. So the people, they gather to whoever speaks their language, and the people are scattered over the whole earth. But guess what, y'all? God confounded their language, but they still believe in these three. They still believed in Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. And with their languages confounded, the Egyptians got three that they worship. Do you think it's a coincidence that all these different people around the world, you know, you have Nimrod. Now remember, before, when they were all one language, they worshiped Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. And then all of a sudden, when they get scattered abroad, you had the Egyptians worship like Osiris, Isis, and Horus. This famous three that the Egyptians worship. Could it be that Osiris, Isis, and Horus are just another name for Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz? Or like all the other Greek gods, like Ishtar, who is the goddess of fertility, who the Greeks held as the goddess of fertility because she had an immaculate conception, as Semiramis lied and said she did. Remember, Semiramis lied and said Nimrod came to her in spirit. So the Greeks, you think it's a coincidence that the Greeks, remember, God scattered everybody. He scattered them because of their language. They still believed what they believed. He didn't change their beliefs. So remember, before they scattered, they believed in these three. So do you think that these people who ended up being called Greeks, who have this goddess, this female that they worship, because she had an immaculate conception, do you think it's a coincidence? And her name is Ishtar. Then you got Zeus and Dionysus and all the other Greek gods they added on. But do you think it's a coincidence that all these different names came about, but they all be like in threes? You know, like I said, the Egyptians have Osiris and Isis, who had a son named Horus. You know, Kanye wears that big medallion of that bird of Horus or whatever. You know, do you think it's a coincidence? Now remember, what did we read about Babylon? She was full of what? In Revelation 17 verse 3 said full of names. It's one woman, sun worship. Remember, Babylon is sun worship, but she's full of names. Could it be she's full of names because when God scattered the people with their language, They still worship the sun, but they just call their little trinity different names. They just call their, that's why you can go, that's why I think about it, when from the Mayans to little tribes down in South America, you would look and the inscriptions on the wall, they always had a sun, you know, they always had a sun behind some little dude standing like this and have the sun behind them and show how they were worshiping the sun and they were worshiping the moon and all this goddess worship. So the common denominator of it all was sun worship. Sun worship. Let me show you how deep it is. You think that's as deep as how the rabbit go? No, because remember, the devil's aim and goal is to take God's throne. Where is God's throne located? In the sanctuary. And what the devil could not do physically, he tried and ended up doing spiritually. Spiritually. Let me say that again. Remember, he tried to physically overthrow the heavenly sanctuary, and he was kicked out of heaven by Jesus and the angels. And what he could not do physically, he ended up doing spiritually. And this is what I call the unspoken prophecy foretelling this of Daniel chapter 8 and the little horn. Daniel, let's go with me to Daniel. Go with me to Daniel. It's raining, but we about to get this finished because this is part one and this is too much. I was gonna cut it short. The Lord said keep going. I'm not gonna cut it short. We're almost done with this part one of Babylon Rising. But Daniel chapter 8. Matter of fact, before we read this unspoken of prophecy about this spiritual power overtaking the heavenly sanctuary spiritually, first go to Ezekiel. Ezekiel 8. Now remember I told y'all about Tammuz, how they started to worship him as the sun. Tammuz worship was so large, he started to be worshipped. He's even mentioned in the Bible by name. He's mentioned in the Bible by name. Go to Ezekiel chapter 8 and we're going to read verse 13. God has taken Ezekiel into the future. He said also unto me, turn thee yet again. Remember, this is Ezekiel 8 verse 13. He said also unto me, turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations that they do. Then he brought me to the door of the gate of the Lord's house, to the sanctuary, which was toward the north, and behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. There sat women weeping for Tammuz. Then he said unto me, hast thou seen this, O son of man? Turn thee yet again. See, the devil has now succeeded, and he has Tammuz worship, sun worship in his house. But God goes into more detail. He says, and thou shalt see, verse 15, and thou shalt see greater abominations than these. And he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house, and behold, at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men, with their backs toward the temple of the Lord, and their faces toward the east, and they worshiped the sun toward the east. So the devil finally succeeded in getting sun worship into God's sanctuary. And that is Ezekiel 8 verse 13 through 16. And God is not pleased at all. And God is not pleased at all. And this is the beginning of how the devil disappeared. The day the devil became a Christian. The day the devil became a Christian. And this is just part one.